Manafort Brothers is the oldest demolition contractor in the Northeast. They have been demolition specialists for clients who are faced with critical deadlines and who own sites that contain hazardous materials. No job is too big or too hazardous. Manafort has the experience, the people, and the right equipment to complete any project on time and within budget. Whether the project is just an interior gut-out for renovation or the removal of a city block in a tight urban center, let Manafort's expertise in comprehensive site remediation go to work for you. Manafort Brothers is highly responsive to any emergency situation. After the tragic events of 9/11, Manafort was one of the very few demolition contractors qualified to work at Ground Zero. Having vast experience in dismantling unstable structures, Manafort's men and heavy equipment went right to work to remove buildings number 4 and 5 of the World Trade Center. Working 2 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, the project was completed 2 weeks ahead of schedule.
Just finished the demolition plan at Maine Yankee. We had our CAD department input all the coordinates for the turbine building, and we just finished our plan. They're going to submit it to the NRC.
Manafort Brothers is the first contractor to completely dismantle and decommission a commercial nuclear atomic energy plant. Manafort's men and extensive equipment have spent 6 months surgically removing the 4 million cubic foot turbine building. Every precaution is taken to ensure that the demolition is executed thoroughly and safely. Hundreds of miles of cables are stripped of their plastic coating that contain PCBs. Pulverized concrete containing low levels of radiation are loaded into boxcars and transported to EPA-certified landfills. All the material is monitored for radiation before it is trucked off the site. To knock down the massive 3-story concrete pedestal that supported the turbine, Manafort used explosives to fracture the concrete. The strategically placed charges were detonated only 100 feet from the highly radioactive spent fuel pool. As Manafort's men and dedicated equipment steadily and professionally removed the contents of the turbine building, explosives were used again to bring down the steel skeleton that remained. With the demolition of the turbine building safely completed, the Manafort crew started the difficult work of removing the containment dome. The first challenge was the 700,000-pound polar crane that rotated at the very top of the dome. The safest, most effective way to remove the crane was to use explosives. Using torches, the men cut away at the huge crane to help weaken the structure. 42-inch shaped charges are carefully transported to the dome. For the massive polar crane to fall cleanly, the charges must be strategically placed. There is no room for error. Work continues into the night as the final preparations for the explosion are completed. A remote-controlled camera records the very first explosion ever to be detonated inside the containment dome of a nuclear power plant.
3, 2, 1, fire.
With the large polar crane resting safely at the bottom of the dome, Manafort's crew begins the work of cutting up the crane into smaller sections so that it can be removed from the area. Once the crane has been removed, the hoe ram takes aim at the 2.5-foot concrete wall that supported the crane. In addition to the demolition of the site, Manafort Brothers has also constructed the facility that will store the spent radioactive fuel once it is removed from the containment dome. Built to stringent NRC specifications, the spent fuel storage facility demonstrates Manafort's ability to handle any site, no matter how big or how technical it may be. When project deadlines become critical, explosives can be used to bring down the structure and reduce the time to complete the demolition. Imploding a building is a highly specialized field. For the building to come down accurately and safely, each phase of work must be carefully executed. Manafort has extensive experience and expertise in preparing buildings for implosions, and their track record for safety is unparalleled in the industry.
Manafort Brothers was actually started back in 1919, moved into projects such as bridges, high-rise buildings, interior demolition, and even nuclear demolition. Changes that have come about in the demolition world have been the aspects of the recycling.
Today, we make every effort to recycle almost everything in the structures we demolish. Now, more than just mainstream steel, Manafort looks at every aspect of recycling, resale, or even repurposing whatever we can, and then factors that cost benefit in during the bidding phase. Recently, Manafort Brothers finished 2 large-scale demolition projects in Connecticut, one in Groton for a pharmaceutical company, and the other in Preston at a former state hospital facility. That was a project to demolish and abate buildings for the value of also the scrap in the structures. Over the 4 years plus that we've been on site in Preston, we've managed to sell and accumulate for the town over $1 million of scrap revenue, which they were then able to use to pay for future buildings to be demolished. To date, Manafort Brothers, with the help of the town and funding, has demolished over 49 structures on that site. Over our 90-plus years in the business, Manafort Brothers has an impeccable reputation in not only demolition, but also all the other facets that we provide.
3, 2, 1, fire.
We're known for the company that can take on the challenging jobs, the more difficult jobs, the stricter jobs that require additional engineering or the ability to design and build something when a demolition project is complete. Another recent project that Manafort's demolition division just finished was one at the American School for the Deaf in West Hartford, Connecticut. The challenges of the School of the Deaf project was we were working on an occupied campus, basically running full-time while we were demolishing. There was a vast amount of asbestos abatement and PCB work that needed to be removed. The project was one that increased almost double in value because of additional asbestos that was discovered in the attic. Manafort Brothers tackled that and finished the job under schedule of what was anticipated. We can offer services where we still use conventional wrecking balls and large cranes to take buildings down, but we also have the ability to provide high-reach hydraulic excavators. Manafort Brothers works in and around occupied schools where sections of the building have to be removed internally or parcels being demolished. Demolition can also mean advanced techniques such as something called hydro demolition, which Manafort Brothers performed on a project years ago in Hartford, where water blasting was used to demolish off layers of concrete that were contaminated, and that had to be done with a specialized subcontractor working hand in hand with Manafort Brothers. In part, the uses of various specialty subcontractors, whether it's through implosion, explosives, different types of remedial action. The one thing that has maintained a constant here at Manafort Brothers is their commitment to safety, and there is no compromise when it comes to safety at Manafort Brothers.
power plant is called Bridgeport Harbor Station. This project is the demolition of 4 tanks. Each tank holds about 7.5 million gallons. The project is phased out in 2 phases. The first phase is about a month and a half. It pertains 3 tanks, Alpha, Charlie, and Delta. And then we come back in October, and that's the next phase, and that phase lasts about 3 months to the beginning of next year, 2017. And we take out Bravo tank as well as the foam house and pump house here on the property. You are seeing Alpha tank, which is to the northern half, furthest away from the water, and Bravo tank, which is also furthest from the water. Closest to the water is Charlie tank and Delta tank. Also, you see our 290 size excavator recycling all the metal here on site. Everything from the tanks are going to be recycled and reused, reprocessed. So for this job, we have a full-time superintendent as well as 4 operators and about 3 laborers on site full-time. We're using a combination of excavators here on site. We're using the 750 with a multi-processor on it. That allows us to help shear up some of the tanks, so that way it's a controlled fall and nothing happens during the project. We're also using grapples, mechanical shears, everything else to help expedite the project. This will all be done by mechanical means as well as burning. Burning via oxygen and acetylene with laborers holding torches and just cutting sections of the tank out to help demolish it mechanically. With excavators, 290 sizes, 450. We have a high reach here on site, which helps us get to the top of the tank. Top of the tank's about 40 feet high, and it spans about 175 feet in diameter. So we really need, the high reach machine here to help take the roof down and keep it safe for everyone. So all the metal from the tanks here on site and any recyclable material will be recycled and reused and repurposed. First time I ever demolished fuel storage tanks. I know the company, Manafort Brothers, have done numerous in the past. So that's really the only difference. First time working on a power plant for myself. That's the company. The company's done numerous power plant jobs and also nuclear decommissioning jobs and stuff like that. So they're very well versed in this field. You have an active power plant on the property at all times, so you got to be cognizant to always make sure you have your proper PPE on. Make sure you do it's called a 2-minute drill card, which is something you do after every single break with the crew. It just goes over emergency exits, making sure you're wearing your PPE, important things like that to stay safe on the project. The total duration of the whole entire project is 2 phases. So if you combine the 2 phases, it's about 4.5 months. So the first phase is about a month and a half. The next phase lasts about 3 months.
Manafort Brothers is the first contractor to completely dismantle and decommission a commercial nuclear atomic energy plant. Currently, they are under contract with Maine Yankee in Wiscasset, Maine until 2005. Manafort's men and extensive equipment have spent 6 months surgically removing the 4 million cubic foot turbine building. Every precaution is taken to ensure that the demolition is executed thoroughly and safely. Hundreds of miles of cables are stripped of their plastic coating that contain PCBs. Pulverized concrete containing low levels of radiation are loaded into boxcars and transported to EPA-certified landfills. All the material is monitored for radiation before it is trucked off the site. To knock down the massive 3-story concrete pedestal that supported the turbine, Manafort used explosives to fracture the concrete. The strategically placed charges were detonated only 100 feet from the highly radioactive spent fuel pool. As Manafort's men and dedicated equipment steadily and professionally removed the contents of the turbine building, explosives were used again to bring down the steel skeleton that remained.
We're a subcontractor to Manafort on this project. We're taking down part of the turbine bay. The turbine bay, we're standing on the south side of the bay right now. The reason that we aren't taking down the entire structure is on the north side, it abuts the control room for the whole facility. And they wanted a buffer zone in there. So actually, we're taking down about 2/3 of it. And this isn't going to be like the classic implosion where you see, a structure come down and it's 10 feet tall. What we're trying to do, you can see behind me on the major columns, you can see the black areas. That's where we have explosives. What we're trying to do is get this down to an elevation that can be readily reached with their excavator and their shears. Right now we're on the southeast corner of the building. And what we want to do is start our explosive sequence on the northwest corner. And by doing that, if we knock out this column, we're putting an eccentric load on this truss. What's going to happen as it starts to fail, then we'll knock out this column. By eliminating the columns on the far side first, it will allow the building to swing, the trusses to swing in away from the building that's in the hot section. We're cutting each vertical member into pieces, so if it fell down, it is too short to reach the containment dome behind me. And you have spent fuel that's in there that is highly radioactive. Manafort has really gone overboard on, looking at the safety aspects of this.
All right, here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, fire.
nice thing about working with Manafort is they understand the business. I think they're really a company that does a marvelous professional job.
With the demolition of the turbine building safely completed, the Manafort crew started the difficult work of removing the containment dome. The first challenge was the 700,000-pound polar crane that rotated at the very top of the dome. The safest, most effective way to remove the crane was to use explosives. Using torches, the men cut away at the huge crane to help weaken the structure. .42-inch shaped charges are carefully transported to the dome. For the massive polar crane to fall cleanly, the charges must be strategically placed. There is no room for error. Work continues into the night as the final preparations for the explosion are completed. A remote-controlled camera records the very first explosion ever to be detonated inside the containment dome of a nuclear power plant.
3, 2, 1, fire.
With the large polar crane resting safely at the bottom of the dome, Manafort's crew begins the work of cutting up the crane into smaller sections so that it can be removed from the area. Once the crane has been removed, the hoe ram takes aim at the 2.5-foot concrete wall that supported the crane. In addition to the demolition of the site, Manafort Brothers has also constructed the facility that will store the spent radioactive fuel once it is removed from the containment dome. Built to stringent NRC specifications, the spent fuel storage facility demonstrates Manafort's ability to handle any site, no matter how big or how technical it may be.
We've been here roughly about 5 years doing all the different stages of demolition here on site. Basically the last thing that we're doing is taking down the containment dome. It's really the biggest and most difficult structure on site. Because of the height, we really couldn't get up to the top and take it down conventionally the way we would a normal building, where you start at the top and you work it floor by floor and from the top down type operation. We brought in controlled demolition, explosives expert.
Somebody said there's 20 million pounds of concrete left here, and if you use the ratio, we've used about 1,100 pounds. That's bringing a ton of concrete down for every pound of explosive, it just shows that gravity takes effect.
We don't think that the dome is going to break up once it hits the ground. I mean, it's so strong with the way the rebar is designed in the liner plate and all of that. I think it's going to come down in one piece.
A method that Justin came up with Maine Yankee was to create arches and leave the dome portion of the structure, which is a difficult part to break. Leave it standing on columns that are approximately 85 feet tall. And a lot of engineering was done. Justin went out and bought this beautiful 750 high reach excavator with a hammer, and what they've done is systematically hammer out these slots. Manafort has wrapped the columns with fencing and fabric to keep any displaced material really from leaving the building's periphery. We're in a hot area now, radiologically controlled area. If any of the concrete comes out of that area into a clean area, then Maine Yankee has to go and survey all that concrete, and albeit it's not going to cause any problem to the environment, it's just a bigger problem. We have 7 delays on each column. They're 9 milliseconds apart, and then the sequence is just going to work its way around, but it's going to be so fast. Everything will be off within 3.5 seconds.
Here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 1, fire.
It's taken years to get approvals to do it. It's taken years of engineering. It's taken months by Manafort doing a great job to do the preparation for CDI to get to a point to start our drilling, to start our explosives loading. The whole goal of this is not to drop it like a regular implosion, but just kick the legs down to lower the dome. It's going to sit intact, to lower it down where it's readily reachable for his excavation equipment.